Hello, my name is Anoa Changa.
The Way with Anoa. The Way with Anoa.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this edition of The Way with Anoa. I hope you're all doing well this evening. I know I'm like on super CP time, not really, because it's under 10 minutes late today. Excuse me, but we have so much going on, getting ready for DC next week and show planning. And not only does my producer, David Grossman, produce and make sure everything is tight and right for The Way, he also is one of our managing editors with the Progressive Army and does like 50 billion other things. Because when you're a small upstart group, that's what happens. So apologies for the delay. Appreciate you all so much for waiting. Please, if you haven't had a chance, like and subscribe to my channel, The Way with Anoa. Definitely like the videos on the Benjamin Dixon Show on channel. If you are new, most of us tend not to be new to Ben's channel, but if you're new to Ben's channel, please subscribe to his channel as well. We have a lot of great content and stuff coming down the pipeline, and we have great shows all week long. Also, want to give a shout out to everyone that has donated thus far to our GoFundMe. Deploy the Progressive Army to DC. We're really excited to be heading down to DC. It'll be Ben, Michael Salomon, the rest of the team that helped do live on the ground coverage for the DNC this summer, plus myself. We will all be in DC Wednesday, Thursday around that time. Really excited to be able to be there to cover not just the Women's March happening on Saturday, but you have Answer Coalition has a big rally. Code Pink has an event. There are teach-ins. There's just so much going on. Hopefully, I'll get to head into the studio and check out Eugene Puryear and the folks over at Miami Necessary in person. That'd be very awesome. So it's just a lot of opportunity to make sure that we're providing you critical analysis, great coverage, real stories from the ground. This is a watershed moment right now leading into this new phase of our movement. And there's so many voices out here who are doing great work. There's so many people who are engaged and involved and really putting it on the line and taking it to the mat every single day. And for those of us, unfortunately, who can't do it full time, all the time, every time, we pitch in where we can. We do what we can, how we can. And there's so much going on right now. We've had the confirmation hearings. Jeff Sessions' hearing started yesterday and I believe continued today. Rex Tillerson's hearing was also today. The questioning, not sure what you guys think, but the questioning is like, it's just like, this, I don't know, the passion and the frustration with which Democrats have gone after like Russia, for example, right? And the whole hacking thing. I would love to see that same fervor, the same tenor, as we look at what's happening right now with the fight to repeal the ACA, as well as with the confirmation hearings. But I almost forgot, and not because you guys aren't important, but because there's just so much going on right now, and my head is just buzzing. I said thank you for the GoFundMe, but patrons, oh my gosh, thank you. So if you haven't already, go by my Patreon. Patreon.com/theway-with-Anoa. $1, $2, a few dollars. It goes a long way. It really does, because you help me be able to make sure that I continue to upgrade the equipment. We pay for all the different subscriptions for the streams, et cetera, et cetera. And hopefully, eventually, I'll get to the point where I'll actually be able to give my producer a stipend and get someone also to come in and start editing my videos as well. So, yes. Thank you all. Shout out to Rachel W, because you're new and I appreciate you. Well, you're probably not new to the show, but you're new to my Patreon list. So thank you. It's been a bunch of people in the past month or so. So Adam, thank you. Shout out. Really, really appreciate it. And I think, there was a new round, it's like a new round of people every week. So it's very cool. I just found out did not know that the big brother, Benjamin Dixon, also became a patron of the way. Oh, holla. Thanks, Ben. But yeah, it's really great and it's really motivational and stuff like that. So I do have an interview coming up for you guys in a few minutes with Sam Sachs of the DC Sentinel. We talk about I pre-recorded this interview a little earlier, and I'll be back at 9 with Brandon. Ben is traveling at the moment, and so Brandon and I will be back at 9. I think we might have a special guest joining us to do coverage. We'll talk more about Trump's. We're going to talk more about Trump's press conference today, the Golden Showers report. I know it seems like Pizzagate. You guys don't want to hear about that anymore, but we're going to talk about the confirmation hearings as well as the problems with people who label themselves progressive but continue to purport negative commentary. I mean, we got a whole long list of things coming up or whatever, but I do want to get you guys this interview that I had with Sam Sachs. It's a really good interview about journalistic integrity and really taking a look at the issues with not just the report that came out from the intelligence community last weekend, but the threat to journalists who are trying their best, to do their jobs, basically, right? When we have the attack on RT that we had in that report, it's not just about the television network. So my son is sitting in the room with me tonight, and he decided to very loudly make some background noise because my kids think stuff like this is funny. Movies will have Easter eggs. My kids just like to do random stuff in the background because even though they're teenagers and they act like they don't need you and they have their own lives, they can't stand that I spend this time with you and not just staring at the ceiling with them. So forgive the little background acoustics from the man child, but he's funny. He actually spends his time randomly watching old movies from time to time. So today he came home and told me that on YouTube he had watched My Family, Me Familia, awesome movie with, I think it's Edward James Olmos is in it. I think Jennifer Lopez is in it, mid-90s ish. And then he also watched My Vida Loca, which I haven't seen since I was much younger. I don't know if you guys have seen that with Mousy and Sad Girl. Two of my friends in high school were totally obsessed with that movie. And I also became obsessed with the movie once I watched it as well. It's like a girl's version almost of not quite a Boys in the Hood, but still it's that rough, young Latina experience. So it was a very good movie. Anyway, I digress. But the interview with Sam Sachs is really good. And I look forward to having more conversations with him and other folks who are outside of these mainstream circles, because one thing that he touched on that really great, and you'll check it out in the interview, is that there are these people who are preening and pruning, and there's this clique. There's this DC, New York, there's this East Coast liberal media clique, and they're trying to impress each other. And for those people who exist outside of those circles, who choose to exist with alternative media or non-mainstream sources, they're an easy target in instances like this. And the attacks on journalists with RT who are American journalists who are trying to tell stories that they believe are important and should be told here in America. We have free speech and all the other good stuff. He said it's, basically it's disgusting. So we're going to start this interview, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Please hit me up on Twitter, and I will be back at 9 with Brandon. So I appreciate you guys much. And I'll see you a little bit. All right. Peace. Awkward. It's okay. We have a slight delay, but that's all right, because that's part of our quirky charm. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to my special Wednesday night early edition of The Way with Anoa. Actually, I am pre-recording right now, and this episode will air a little later on my show, actually live. And I am joined by Sam Sachs of the DC Sentinel, among other things, right? Yeah. Sam, how are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on the show, Noah. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me. Sam and I met doing election night coverage back in November on radio.
Wild night.
Yeah. Oh wow. I mean, it's just still, even though it's happened, and here we are a little over a week from inauguration day. It's just like, wow. Like we did because I hopped off with the guys to hop on with you guys to do coverage, and went back to our show too. Mm-hmm. And so we were up into the wee hours. Like, I can't believe this is happening.
Yeah, there's still fleeting moments of that. Like, you forget what's going on. You're enjoying your life, and then every now and then you're like, oh wait, Trump is about to be president. It just hits you.
It's like, oh man, that's crazy. So, of course, we all know, we've heard so much about it. Russia. Recently, we briefly chatted over the weekend. Recently, the intelligence community released this report, finally detailing, finally giving us the proof, the information, but it turned out to be not so much.
Yeah. Not so much.
I've heard people refer to it as like when you were in high school and you had to do a 10-page paper, you only had like 2 or 3 pages and you just fluffed your way through the rest of it. So what were your thoughts?
That's exactly what it seemed like to me.
What were your thoughts? Like, taking, as someone who has been covering, political issues, covering this campaign, this race, what were your thoughts kind of, just looking at that report, and then just the way the conclusions and stuff were being drawn elsewhere in the media?
I was honestly shocked reading the report because, I mean, look, we've been debating for over 2 months now the main issue of was the Russian government directing the hack on the DNC and John Podesta, and then behind leaking that information to WikiLeaks, which then released the information in the run-up to the election. Now, speaking for myself at least, I would not be surprised at all to learn that the Russian government did that. This isn't a surprising thing. Look, governments hack each other. The U.S. has been involved in over 80 acts of election interference over the last half century or so. The Russians have been involved in similar activities. I mean, this is sort of the way the world works. So, I've still been skeptical. I'm waiting to see that evidence for that. And I thought that when we were going to get this report last week, that we were actually going to see some strong evidence instead of just the sort of circumstantial evidence we've seen that's been hyped up by people for political reasons. But we didn't get any of that. Instead, we got more assertions, including some assertions that it even noted the NSA doesn't fully sign on to, like the Office of Director of National Intelligence and the CIA signed on to. But really, the most shocking thing is that the majority, about half of this report was information on RT, the Russian news channel, which, of course, seems like a bizarre entity to target if you're compiling a report about the hack of the DNC and so-called Russian interference. Not only that, the information about RT in this report was 5 years old. It was from a 2012 annex. It wasn't even up-to-date information. Not only that, there's not one single example in this report of RT spreading fake news or news to interfere in the 2016 election. Again, most of this is from 2012, so it would apply, I guess, to the 2012 election that Barack Obama won. And I don't think that the intelligence community's conclusions are that RT helped interfere in the 2012 election on behalf of Obama, too. But things like singling out RT for reporting on anti-fracking movements, things like singling out RT for hosting a third-party convention. I used to actually work at RT in 2012. I was one of the producers on that third-party debate, not convention, debate. And so, I was surprised to see work that I've done on RT. And all of these reports, the coverage of Occupy Wall Street, all of these things are the people putting these out aren't some nefarious Russians in Moscow or anything like that. They're American journalists living and working in Washington, D.C., in New York, who are chasing stories that they care about, that they think that highlighting these stories will improve the country that they live in and love, the United States of America. So to see that sort of reporting cast as a form of foreign election interference was just bizarre. And it scared me because It shows that the full weight of the U.S. intelligence community is being trained on American journalists who work at RT. One, and two, is it endangers future dissent movements, future movements against fracking, future movements against Wall Street greed, future movements to have a more robust democratic system. It endangers those movements and allows enemies of those movements to cast them as just Russian stooges or Kremlin pawns or something like that. So there was just a lot of odd things in the report. It makes you think that maybe this whole thing was a bait and switch, that, let's get people hyped up about cyber hacking. We had that hearing last week in which you had the intelligence chiefs up there talking mainly about cyber hacking. And then a report comes out the day after and half of it is about RT instead of cyber hacking. So yeah, definitely disturbing on a lot of levels.
Well, and I think you made a really good point. Well, we actually touched on several good points. But one thing I thought when you said, like, these are journalists, and we're talking about RT, we're talking about American journalists that are trying to give voice to stories that we're not, because you're not seeing coverage of the anti-fracking actions and movements.
Not nearly enough.
No, not nearly enough. You weren't really, when Occupy was happening, you did not really see the stories and the information being told. Like that's the whole thing with when you look at like progressive or independent media, just generally, right? There are voices, there are stories that are being told, there are issues that are being discussed that are outside of the corporate media narrative. That is being fed to people. And it was interesting to see so much focused on RT. Even I remember reading recently, I just read some posts by Abby Martin, because her show that she hasn't done in over 2 years was also mentioned, right, as part of the plot to undermine our election. And it's just like, how is this even possible? How is this even a plausible argument? Like you said, when the information you're using is one, old. Right.
Yeah, I mean, Abby Martin's show went off the air in February 2015. I mean, that was months before Donald Trump even declared he was going to run for president. So, well,
it's a few months from even before Secretary Clinton had even announced
anybody did
officially, right. It hadn't even started. So it's what's fascinating to me is how much people are readily eating this up. And it's just like, did you read don't just trust what the Washington Post is saying it says. Did you read the report yourself? It's only like 20 pages. Just skim through it.
Well, it's interesting because the New York Times did a write-up of the report, and in the same exact article, the New York Times talks about this damning, explosive report that came out of the intelligence community. And then a few paragraphs lower, it says, there was no new evidence contained in the report, so it's not something that will appease skeptics. And it's like, get you an article that can do both here. Like, how can you read this report and come to those same two conclusions that are completely at odds with each other?
Right, exactly. And it's just that this type of stuff, though, also, like, you label people as stooges of the Russian, empire. You claim that there is interference because of opposition in the media, and then you also throw in that fake media label on people every once in a while too, and it really does look like we're shaping up to see a suppression of certain voices as we move forward, and as we move forward now under a Trump administration that already has an issue with the press anyway. So it seems like it does set up a very interesting playing field for us going forward.
Well, the troubling thing I've noticed, especially when it comes to RT, and I noticed this when I used to work at RT back a couple of years ago, and I do a podcast that's distributed on Sputnik, so I have affiliations with Sputnik as well. And what I've noticed is how personal the attacks are against individuals, American journalists who work at these outlets. Look, there are a number of state-owned media outlets operating all around the world. A number of those outlets broadcast here in the U.S. The U.S. has state-run media outlets that broadcast all around the world. This isn't a unique thing here. And yet RT has been singled out because of, given the geopolitics right now, even though the U.S. and Russia still cooperate on several issues. I mean, right now there are Russians and Americans in space. There are a number of issues that the Russians, to call ourselves enemies would be absurd. But yet there's this effort to smear journalists who work at these entities. Look, if you want to criticize RT, fine, criticize RT. I have criticized RT. Sometimes they put out bad stories, like all other news outlets. Sometimes their management makes decisions that leave me scratching my head. Sometimes their editorial lines are a bit off. But I will put that up against any of the cable news networks, MSNBC, CNN, Fox, any day of the week, who make just as egregious mistakes and have a far wider audience that they broadcast those mistakes to. But there's an effort to not just smear the network, which I said is fine, but to smear journalists who work there and to, as we've said, cast them as some sort of foreign agents to make sure that they never have another job in media again. And that's all just, it's underhanded, and I think it speaks to this sort of clique in DC, this sort of DC journalism clique of people who are constantly preening in front of each other and virtue signaling to each other about how outraged you are about the Russians or how outraged you are about this and that. And it just feeds into it to where you've created this evil boogeyman called RT that really has like 0.03% of the viewership as Judge Judy. It's just like, it doesn't compare.
Well, that was my question too. When the day the report comes out, that was my question. Like, you know, I had several followers who were like, "Well, I'm in West Virginia and I watch it." I'm like, "Yeah, but do your neighbors watch it?" I know when I lived in West Virginia, I lived in West Virginia for several years. Most people, I didn't even realize RT was even a TV channel until I moved. I'm now in Atlanta until I moved down here, and my dad was watching it one day. Yeah, like I had no clue. So, but it was very interesting. This assertion that this channel is just so powerful, right? That it completely derailed a presidential election. And it's just like, okay, what's the viewership? Yeah. What's the demographic? Who's even watching it? A lot of the people, when we're talking about a lot of people who are even watching something like RT, they're probably people who are more than likely who are going to go third party, or they're not necessarily, you know, the standard bearer of the Democratic Party that decided to stay home for the plethora of reasons that kept people home this election cycle. So it's just personally frustrating for me, the lack of critical thinking, the lack of awareness of this heavy-handed nature, as you put it, that's not only, like you said, personally attacking journalists and undermining undermining just everything about them, you know, their professionalism,
their credibility,
their credibility. Exactly. I mean, and it's threatening people's livelihoods too, right? Like, so, but then we also, like we've already talked about, we have this attempt to undermine and to, you know, castigate this type of reporting that reports on issues that are, again, outside of narratives that are being pushed by, you know, corporate media. But I just find it boggles my mind when people are always just like, well, aren't you concerned that the Russians? I agree with you. It is very possible that whether it was actually directed by Putin himself or some other Russian operative or whatever, it's very possible. I mean, America and Russia and China and all these other countries, they engage in cyber warfare. This is something that happens, right? But that doesn't mean...
And what do we do out of it? I mean, that's the issue. Even if it is true that the Russians did it, I mean, it's pretty well established that they didn't change vote tallies, and it's pretty well established that if Hillary Clinton's campaign wasn't so decided to campaign in 3 states in the Rust Belt, they would have easily won the election. Instead, they told the SEIU, which was trying to go from Iowa to go campaign in Michigan, to turn around, go back to Iowa. Like, these were very poor strategic decisions that led to Clinton losing. So I can see why they want to blame the Russians instead of blaming themselves. But assuming if it was the Russians, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to escalate a cyber war with them? How does that benefit anybody, especially if you look at our own actions in this same arena here? So there aren't many, okay, what do we do now options left, even if it is established. So given the amount of time Democrats have devoted to this issue, especially while Republicans in Congress and Trump are hard at work, not focused on this issue at all, but hard at work destroying any semblance of a middle class and New Deal economics that have existed, and repealing the Affordable Care Act and doing all this stuff, we're ending up putting ourselves at a huge disadvantage strategically here.
Absolutely. And the Senate confirmation hearings, right? Like today, you know, Rex Tillerson's confirmation hearing. We've had Sessions as well. I mean, you're right. There are so many absolutely pressing and serious issues, but we're still, you know, trying to prove Russia and hacks and things like that.
And I'm glad you brought up the Rex Tillerson hearing, because here we have the head of ExxonMobil, who's going to be the Secretary of State. Any other year, if this, absent this Russia thing, the main focus of Democrats would be the fact that we have a guy who's going to make climate change even worse. We have an oil man who's going to be overseeing our diplomatic overtures on climate change. And yet, if you were to have watched the hearing today, you wouldn't have heard climate change brought up until an hour and a half or so into the hearing, leaving aside the protesters who did speak up in the first few minutes of the hearing to discuss climate change. But before that, we had Republicans, Democrats each line up to ask Tillerson questions, and they were all focused on Russia, hardly anything on climate change until much later in the hearing.
Well, that's part of the issue too, right? And this similar with Sessions, with conversations right leading up to his hearing about how you have Democrats who are talking about how he's actually nice, or he's actually, he's a man of his word, even if they don't have ideological differences. We see the Democrats get very, very bold, and they're very willing to fight about something like Russia, right, and these hacks. But when it comes down to really serious issues, I mean, because even assuming that this hacking was Russian, there was quote unquote interference, even if you assumed all that, the fact that Democrats didn't even fight as hard as they could to deal with, address the issues of voter suppression that have not only been persisting since 2013, but before, but specifically since, the gutting of the VRA in 2013, had that been a major focus when you're looking at, North Carolina, when you're looking at major states in the South, even when you're looking at places like Wisconsin and Michigan, with the broken machines that we saw in Detroit and just all types of stuff. I mean, but we saw these issues in the primary process as well, right? The extremely long lines, the situation that happened in Arizona with fewer polls open. I mean, we've seen these issues, and Democrats have sat down when it's time to actually address these very pressing issues that have meaningful and long-term outcomes. But we're going to talk about Russia because that's what makes us look good and feel better.
It's taken up all the oxygen in the room from all these other issues. We just talked about climate change. You brought up voter suppression. I mean, the hearing yesterday in which you had the spy chiefs up in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee talking about last week's report, you had Senator Heinrich, Democrat, talking with FBI Director James Comey, and they're discussing what kind of harm foreign actors could do if they hacked into statewide voter databases. Now, there was the Illinois and Arizona had their voter databases hacked into. It's been alleged by the intelligence community that these were the Russians probing around. They didn't take any information. They didn't alter any information. But James Comey said that the risk is there, that they could alter information, and you wouldn't notice it until Election Day when people showed up and realized that their information had been changed or they were kicked off the voting rolls. And this is what Martin Heinrich was warning about. He's like, oh my God, foreign actors could hack into databases and purge people from voting rolls? Well, that's exactly what happened, but it wasn't foreign actors. It was domestic actors. It was Republican operatives. It was Secretary of State of Kansas Kross Kobach, who set up the cross-check system with several other states, including battleground states that purged hundreds of thousands of voters off the rolls. And if you look at a state like Michigan, the margin of victory for Trump was actually fewer than the number of people who were kicked off the voting rolls in that state as a result of crosscheck. And there's no hearings on crosscheck. There's no studying it by the FBI and our intelligence community to find which Republican operatives committed crimes by stripping people of their right to vote for the election. Instead, it's all about Russia. And for some reason, Democrats think this is a winning issue. Hillary Clinton's campaign thought if they spent the last month of the campaign beating that drum on Russia, that it would move voters. But we saw it doesn't. Voters don't care about Russia. In fact, voters want good relations with Russia. We don't want to go to war with Russia. People lived for 50 years in a Cold War under threat of Russia. It's nice not to have that threat right now, but for some reason, Democrats haven't gotten that message.
Absolutely. And even when you're talking about like the cross-check and Secretary of State's, purging people, I mean, we saw that in the general election, the praise for Kasich, for example, right? Oh, Kasich is so brave. He's standing up against Trump. Meanwhile, his Secretary of State in Ohio purged, I forget what the number was, but thousands and thousands of people, and we've seen that happening in state after state, time and time again. I mean, we knew the writing was on the wall. Even Ari Berman wrote a piece leading up to the general election about North Carolina, and looking back through his writing, wrote a similar piece leading up to the primary. So it's like, even if you claim you didn't know before this cycle started, you at least knew coming out of the primary that we were going to have a problem come North Carolina in the general election. You knew we were going to have a problem in Wisconsin because of the issues in Wisconsin. I mean, there's just so much that's on the table, particularly as we're looking towards 2018 and 2020, with redistricting coming up again. There's Democrats are running around, like you said, trying to save face, trying to make it seem better because Russia is evil and came and interfered. But there are all these issues in areas where they have dropped the ball. Like we said, voter suppression is what we've just been talking about, but climate change, whether it's racial justice and police brutality, education, dealing with fracking, clean water. Clean water is huge. Finally, clean water. We
still don't have clean water in Flint. I mean,
we don't have clean water in Flint. We still have water protectors in Standing Rock. Yes, we still have water protectors out of Standing Rock. We don't have clean water in Flint. We actually have impacted communities all over the country. We saw recently with Corpus Christi. Myself, it's actually been 3 years now. It's been 3 years this week since West Virginia. We had a chemical spill when I lived in West Virginia, in Charleston, West Virginia. We had a chemical spill that impacted our water source, and we went approximately 5 months without water. We were bottled water, everything for approximately 5 months. But through that experience, I learned there are so many other communities where that is a reality for people, where they are bottled water, at least for cooking and cleaning, cooking and preparing food and stuff, and that's been like years. And it's insane. It's extremely expensive. It's cost prohibitive for a lot of families. And we're not even talking about environmental justice, like as a whole. There are all these issues, and American families and communities are suffering. But hey, Russia. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So you wrote a piece, like moving a little bit to today. Sure. You wrote a piece today about the Trump's first press conference since July.
Yeah, it's quite a show.
So tell me, he's finally, decided he's going to be presidential, I guess, for lack of a better term, and speak to the people.
Yeah.
So tell me about your piece and your thoughts about.
Heading into that, Trump hasn't held a press conference since July. He announces he's going to hold this press conference, that the focus of the conference was supposed to be on how he's going to resolve his conflicts of interest, what he's going to do with his business, a question that has been persisting since he was elected. Right. Of course, the day before this press conference on yesterday, we had the Golden Showers memo drop. I don't know how else to describe this memo, but that was pretty much. And now, I guess we should take a moment and talk about just journalistic standards for a second here.
Yes.
Because, and this is something that Glenn Greenwald has written extensively about, but how, when you're writing on Russia nowadays, you don't need to have any journalistic standards. We saw this in October with the Franklin Thurs piece in Slate about the secret link between the Trump campaign and some Russian bank. Of course, a day later, it's proven that that's not the case. We saw this with the Washington Post reporting on Prop or Not, that the Russians are behind all these fake news. And then we see days later, that story's bunked too. And then Washington Post does it again with the whole Vermont utility hack.
Yes.
That the Russians accessed our energy grid. A day later, we realize that that's bunked too. So when CNN comes out with a report yesterday based on anonymous officials that Trump has been briefed that the Russian government has blackmail info on him, then you should, take this sort of stuff with a grain of salt. But instead, you see journalists all running with this story, promoting this story, and then BuzzFeed jumps on it and just decides to release the full Golden Shower memo that even BuzzFeed admits is filled with information that is uncorroborated, unverifiable, and also information that's completely wrong. And so once again, we've fallen for this hysteria over Russia because of poor journalism. And just like these previous stories where a day comes out and we realize it's bunk, here it comes today, and there's an NBC News report that says that actually the intelligence community didn't brief Trump on this memo, but instead had this memo in their folder just in case they wanted to explain to Trump the difference between vetted real information they see and unvetted information that's circulating around, i.e. the Golden Showers memo, which is a big difference from what was originally reported yesterday. So,
right.
As you can imagine, Donald Trump was, rip-roaring pissed off that he sees this information about him splashed all over the internet.
Right.
And so he used this press conference to declare war on BuzzFeed and CNN. And, I have my problems with these outlets. I think BuzzFeed, for the most part, is a garbage outlet, although it does have some decent reporting that they've done lately.
Right.
Ellie Watkins does some good reporting. And I think CNN is a garbage outlet too. But look, these are journalistic outlets, and there's something disturbing about the incoming president of the United States singling them out, saying that they're going to suffer consequences as a result of this. And this also, it harms future efforts to hold Trump accountable.
Yes. Because
when we do get that bombshell memo in the future, bombshell report of actual evil wrongdoing, Trump's going to be like, here comes the fake news again. Look at what they've done before. And then no one's going to believe it. So, we should protect outlets like BuzzFeed and protect outlets like CNN, but they really are not making this us, and they're putting other adversarial journalists at a huge risk by falling for these sort of I don't know what to call them, but Russian hoaxes that are being by whether it's people in the government, whether it's actual intelligence officers, as Trump has suggested, and as Glenn Greenwald has suggested, when he says there's now an all-out war between the intelligence community and the president-elect of the United States. Whoever's doing it, our media, our news media, needs to be a much better at discerning what is in that reality from stuff that's worth reporting on.
I like what you were saying and how you framed this in terms of journalistic integrity, because just like you said, just looking at what has happened, again, just looking at this entire election cycle, it just seems like it's continuously been a downgrade in terms of what standards or what effort is put into actually validating, corroborating information that's provided. It just seems like, okay, this fits the agenda, go with it, and then if it's not right, we'll figure it out later.
And again, this was a very important issue that was supposed to be addressed at this press conference, and that's Trump's conflict of interest, and it was addressed. But yet, instead of probing him on all the problems with the arrangement that his lawyer presented today about how he's going to, take his name out of the Trump or he's just going to step away from the Trump organization, put it in a trust, leave it to his sons to run, and he won't have anything to do with future decisions. Well, there's still a lot of problems with that, as the head of the government ethics office came out today and said this arrangement still doesn't fit with the ethical schematic that other presidents have operated under. Instead of using that press conference to really probe him on this stuff, we had reporter after reporter ask him about the possibility that he's committed lewd sex acts in Russia that has amounted to blackmail information. It's like, what world are we living in right now?
No, exactly. And it just seems like that continues to be the problem. Like there are outlets, there are reporters, individuals who have the opportunity to help drive the narrative in a way that's not just productive in terms of, holding him accountable, but that can really help bolster the work being done by folks who engage in organizing and stuff like that on the ground. Those who are working, in terms of policy, trying to aid. There's some stuff that's being done out there, but like you said, there's a sensationalism. It's like the reality, TV effect on our politics now, and now on our, journalism and discourse, where everything is like a freak show.
Yeah, I've compared it. Have you ever seen that movie Burn After Reading?
Yes.
It's a Coen Brothers movie. This whole episode reminds me of that a little bit. And it gets me thinking that maybe the secret memo, the Golden Showers memo, that this thing has been circulating since last summer. A lot of prominent journalists have had this, decided not to publish it because, again, none of this is corroborated information. We've had a lot of lawmakers in possession of this memo. John McCain in December passed this memo on to FBI Director James Comey. The FBI already had this memo, though. And I'm just wondering if, like, all the hysterics we've seen over the last 3 months about Russia has something to do with this memo that has, like, been bouncing around in the brains of a lot of prominent people involved in the discourse over the last few months, you know, that, like, not that they, you know, have pushed out the claims in the memo, but just like it's shaded their reporting and it's influenced the way they think about the election. And when they go on and be a commentator or a talking head on TV, it's in the back of their mind that some of these allegations in this memo might actually be true, when in fact they're probably not true at all. It's, you know, Pizzagate is completely absurd, ridiculous, but it has this way of infecting people's brains to where, like, you know, people I've known in the past who were, you know, fringish but still somewhat decent independent journalists, like, fell into this black hole of Pizzagate and have completely lost their minds. This memo could have that same effect on people to cause them to lose their minds and chase these conspiracy theories all over the place.
Well, and I think what you just said is a good point too, about how this has probably been in the back of their minds, because that's something that we continue to hear. We've heard this though, right? That Russia has stuff on Trump. Like it's been very cryptic. Like, people have been saying that though, that they likely have stuff. It's possible they could blackmail him. And I've been sitting here like, what? Like, and then this comes out and it's like, this is hilarious.
It reads like a Kurt Eichenwald fever dream. If you're like reading this memo, it's like something that Kurt Eichenwald would dream up and want to like put out there. Yeah, like it's my dad says it's a WWE effect on things, and it's like it's sometimes it's just so bad. Like, all you can do is laugh, but then it's so sad that you're laughing. Yeah. But it's I don't like, it's sad. Yeah, and it's bizarre times.
It's very bizarre times, but I'm glad that we have voices like yours, writers like you, who are able to get in there and get in the story and keep some integrity in the process.
Well, thank you very much. And us Putin stooges are strong in number here.
I know we are. I love all my people over at Radio Sputnik. So thank you. I really appreciate you coming in and hopping in and taking some time out of your evening and joining me.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you, Anoa.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
I'll definitely have to come over and chat with you on your podcast as well. So
yeah, I'll DM you in the next week or so. We'll set up a time for you to come on and talk about some issues that are near and dear to you as well.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, I appreciate you very much, Sam. Talk to you later.
Yeah. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Night.
Come on, really?
The Way with Anoa. The Way with Anoa.